Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Welcome to the Wealth and Poverty Week. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Lee from the Sociology Department. I'm so pleased to welcome you all here to hear a fantastic talk by our guest, Dr. Katharine Broton. Dr. Broton joins us today from the College of Education at the University of Iowa, where she also holds a courtesy appointment in sociology, and quite a number of other faculty associations that are actually kind of too numerous to list, so I'll leave them aside here. She received her doctorate in sociology in 2017 from the University of Wisconsin at Madison, where she also worked with the Hope Lab. I suspect many of you in here are already familiar with the work of that lab. And without further ado, I will turn it over to her to speak with us today. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, all right. We're still in business. Tripped on that cord. I have to start by thanking Liz and thanking Young and everybody else who made today's talk possible. I'm just absolutely delighted to be with you all here in Ohio. So, we have about an hour together. The plan that I have is to spend some time talking about the current context of higher education today, then dive into some of the details about food and housing insecurity, something you'll hear me call maybe basic needs insecurity or material hardship more broadly, some of the implications of those experiences for students. And then real quickly at the end, I just want to mention some potential responses and solutions to the problem. I'm happy to take questions, clarifying questions probably best throughout, and then hopefully we'll have some time for some robust discussion at the end. Really, when I'm out and about talking to groups, it's really the questions and the discussion that I look forward to the most. So I really look forward to hearing from you, if not throughout the talk, then at the end. So to get started, against this backdrop here in Athens and on my title slide, right, we have this idyllic version of college in America, right? It's such a great place where students can sit out on the lawn and find themselves. But the reality is that these stereotype ideals of a college experience are really only represent a fraction of today's college students and what they experience. So I want to start by sharing with you the faces of hunger and homelessness. So when I talk about some of the numbers and statistics today, you can think about Christine and Colin here on my slide. So on the left is Christine. She's a student at actually an elite private university. And if you can't read her board, it says, I've skipped meals, I've applied for food stamps, I've dumpster dived. One winter, my roommate threw away an almost full jar of peanut butter, and I stole it from her trash can. This is the face of hunger, right? Christine is the face of hunger. And this is Colin. ABC News chronicled him. He attends a public university in Texas. Colin told his parents that he was living on campus, and he told his college that he was living with his parents, right? And in reality, he was living in his car. So Colin, even though he was working, he didn't have enough money to make ends meet to afford rent, right? So these are the realities of today's college students. I also think it's important to know who today's college students are, because if we don't know who we are, it's hard to design policies and programs to meet their needs and help them reach their goals. So today, about 40% of undergraduates are actually age 25 or older. About 2/3 are working while they're going to school, and 1 in 4 are student parents responsible for dependents. Most students attend a college that looks more like this, right, than a flagship university. Over half of students will attend a 2-year college at some point in their college career. Only 13% live on campus, and about 40% attend school part-time. And finances are a major concern for many of today's students. So about half of all undergraduates are financially independent, according to the FAFSA. About over 40% are living at or below the official income poverty line. And of course, debt is a concern for a growing number of students. So we have made some gains in higher education. We've seen improvements in college access for our students of color in particular. So there's been increases among our Black and Hispanic students in particular, and these students, along with their low-income peers, are more likely to be juggling work and family responsibilities in addition to attending college. But even though we've made some gains on access, there's still these really large and actually growing gaps in college completion by race and ethnicity, right? So our white adults are more likely to hold a college degree than our adults of color. We also see these really large and growing gaps by family income as well. According to one estimate, students from high-income families are now 6 times more likely to earn a bachelor's degree by the time they're in their late 20s than those who come from low-income families. And part of the reason for these gaps in college success is the rising price of college. So this graph shows how the price of college has changed over time. Thank you so much. It's still summer in Ohio. It's very nice. So this is starting in the late 1990s, going up recently, and that orange solid line is the price of tuition fees, room and board at public 4-year colleges. It's about $21,000 per year. Even if you get the Pell Grant, right, that's our nation's flagship program to support students from low-income families, that's about $6,000. So what we see is that students and their families as well, along with their state and local resources, right, they need to come up annually with about $15,000 plus books and supplies. I ran the numbers for OU. This is the net price according to iPads, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And the net price, just to be really clear, that's the sticker price minus all grants. So minus the Pell Grant, minus any institutional grant or state grant aid. You subtract that off, what do students actually have to come up with? And this is broken down by family income. So you'll see students that are earning students from families that are earning, up to $48,000 per year are asked to pay around $16,000 or $18,000 annually. Even families in that median range, $48,000 to $75,000, are asked to come up with about $22,000 each year. So this is another way to think about it. Excuse me. Over time, family income for all but the wealthiest Americans has been pretty stagnant, right? I think that's something that many of us are familiar with. So while family income's been stagnant and the net price has been growing, that means that students and their families are devoting a larger and larger share of their family income towards paying for college. So back in 2004, these different bars are different time points, right? 62.5% of families fell in this green bar where they're paying anywhere from 0 to 25% of their income for college. So if it's a family that makes $50,000 per year, they're paying $12,500 or less. And as you can see, over time, that green bar is shrinking, right? So less than half of undergraduates are in that situation. Alternatively, right, that dark red bar at the top has been growing. So that's the share, that dark red bar, that the students and their families that are asked to pay 100% or more of their family income toward the price of college. So these are our students who come from families that makes $15,000 a year and they're asked to pay $15,000 or more toward the price of college. So that's now almost 1 in 4 undergraduates, right? So it's against this backdrop of the rising net price of higher education that we find students who are struggling to make ends meet, right? What do? Well, I already told you that about 2/3, the majority are working, right? But work doesn't pay like it used to, right? It's no longer possible to work your way through college on the summers, part-time, the way that prior generations were able to. The minimum wage just doesn't pay enough, right? We know that students take fewer classes. They might stop in and out and have these in and out enrollment patterns. We know students are taking on debt, but I think it's important to note that the federal loan limit is capped at $5,500 for first-year students. So even if you took all of your federal loans, of which only $3,500 of that could be subsidized, you're only getting partway up to that net price that you need to make up, right? So what we find is that students are stretching their budget in different ways and going without. Okay, so zooming in on food and housing insecurity. So food insecurity, right, is a particular term with a particular definition, right, that's been agreed upon, that's been in use for decades, right? It's the limited or uncertain access to nutritionally adequate and safe food, or the ability to acquire such food in an acceptable way. Hunger is a related but distinct idea, right? Hunger is that sensation, that pain that you feel in your stomach when you haven't had enough to eat. The experiences of food insecurity are actually more broad and more diverse than just that feeling of hunger. Similarly, housing insecurity is a pretty broad term, right? This is students who are having trouble affording housing, keeping housing, right, staying in housing, and homelessness is the most extreme form, right? That's where people don't have a fixed place to live or to stay at night. Now, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, there are 4 levels of food security. So first group, high food security. No problems, they're doing just fine on the food scene. The next group has marginal food security, right? These are the students that have anxiety or worry over their food supply. They're worried that their cupboards might run bare at the end of the month. The next level are those with low food security. These are the students that are changing the quality, variety, and quality of their diet. So these are the students that are subbing out, often cheap, right, not very nutritionally adequate foods, right, just getting something in their stomach usually to feel full. It might be noodles, it might be, expired food, it might be something else, but they're trying to get something in their bodies so they don't have that hunger sensation. And then those with very low levels of food security, these are students that have disrupted eating patterns, right? These are the students that are skipping meals, some going without food for entire days. This is the level that's most frequently associated with hunger. Okay, so recently, Aidan Nazmiad and his colleagues did a systematic review of the literature to try and find out how many students actually are food insecure, right? What is the share, what is the prevalence? And he and his colleagues found 8 studies that met certain quality criteria that use that USDA measurement that I just talked about. Several of the estimates are work that I've done with my colleague and mentor in a new paper called Going Without, an Educational Researcher. And when you put these estimates together and you take into account the size of the sample, so the big studies get more weight than the small studies, they find that about half of US undergraduates experienced some form of food security in the last month. I did the similar thing for housing studies. The bigger bubbles are the bigger studies. The studies on the left are multi-site studies. We don't have an agreed upon definition in the same way in the housing world as we do in the food world. But again, we're almost half. We're about 45% have some type of housing trouble. They're skipping their utility payments, right? They're worried about eviction, having trouble paying their rent. They're doubling up. They're living in places that are not meant to be lived in, right? We know students are living in storage lockers and other types of things, right? So about, close to half, again, are also having housing challenges, and right around 10% had experienced some form of homelessness in the past year. So food and housing insecurity affects all types of students on all types of campuses, but there are some groups that are at risk, more at risk than other groups, right? So we've looked into this, and students in these groups tend to be more likely to report food and housing insecurity risks than others. So particular are students who have experience as former foster youth, or students of color, or LGBTQ students, first gen, low income, student parents, those who live in high poverty areas or grew up in food insecure homes. So there's one student in some of the interviews that I've done that fits almost all of these boxes, right? And because she fits almost all of these boxes, it might be why her experiences of material hardship are among the most severe that we have seen in our studies. And her name's Coco. So let me just tell you a little bit about Coco. So Coco's a Black woman. When we first met her, she was attending a 4-year university in her hometown. And we asked her, how's college going? Do you have any financial concerns? And Coco said, quote, eating, that's my main issue. No money to eat because we're so living in poverty. She went on to explain that, quote, living in poverty is very complicated, end quote. And she went on to say that this is very stressful lack of money, poverty causes me a lot of stress. We asked her on a scale of 1 to 10, how much stress, and she says, quote, it's a 10. You ain't got no food, you ain't got no car, you don't have any gas for your car, no transportation, period. You've got to get your papers done and everything, end quote. She went on to say, and I quote, if I have money, I would not be looking at other people's faces while they're eating. I can't focus, end quote. So the stress and anxiety and the worrying that Coco experienced, right, by not knowing where her next meal coming from, right, was clearly inhibiting her ability to do her best in college, right? So as Coco explained in her interviews, and as many of you can probably theorize and think about, right, there's a lot of reasons to think that students who are having struggling to meet their basic material needs, right, would have lower levels of academic success, right? There's multiple pathways. We know that material hardship is associated with mental health challenges. I have some stats in the bonus slides if people are interested in that, but the mental health rates are quite high among this population. Those of you who have studied scarcity might know the work of Millay, Nathan, and Shafir, right? They talk about having a cognitive bandwidth, and if you don't know where your next meal is coming from, you have to devote some of your cognitive bandwidth to that, right? Then you can't focus. There's also just logistical challenges students told us about, right? I got to get here, I'm on the bus, and it takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of reasons to think why, experiences of food and housing insecurity might impact student success. So I want to share some data from the Healthy Minds Community College Survey, which is a study I did with my colleagues at the Wisconsin Hope Lab, the Healthy Minds Community Study out of the University of Michigan, Single Stop, and ACCC, the Association of Community College Trustees, who are all partners in this data collection effort at these 10 colleges across 7 states. So even though it's really a convenient survey sample here, the students in the sample looked a lot like the national estimates of what community colleges students look like nationally, and they have similar levels of food and housing insecurity that we've found in other studies, as well as what the meta-analyses have found. So what I did is after the survey, I waited a year, and then I went back to the colleges, and I asked for the students' transcript data. And I linked it up. What did they say on their survey in year 1? And then what did their grades and their credential achievement look like the following year, in year 2, right? So this slide is just showing you unadjusted bivariate relationship that students who took our survey and said, I have high levels of food security, right? They were more likely to earn a credential the following year than those who had marginal levels of food security. Those who had marginal were more likely than those who had low. Those who had low were more likely than those who had very low levels of food security, right? So there's classic stepwise pattern that you might expect. So, but there's lots of reasons, right, that this could be the case. I know when I started working in this area, I thought, is this really about food insecurity, or is this, an income effect, say, right? We have lots of data that shows that students from low-income families, right, have lower educational performance outcomes than those from high-income families, right? I'm sure you can think of lots of reasons why we might see this, bivariate association. So what I did is I controlled for as many things as I could possibly think of to control for, right? So I controlled for family income. I controlled if they were receiving financial aid. I accounted for the test scores when they enrolled in college. They had to take test scores, right? Tests to see their placement levels. So I controlled for their prior academic performance, as well as a whole host of demographic features like age and race and sex and citizenship status, right, and all those things. And what I found is that when I accounted for those background variables, the magnitude of the relationship was smaller, right? Those background variables explained some of that relationship, but there was still a statistically significant difference that I think is substantively meaningful, right? So after I count for those academic preparation, demographics, income and things, right, there's still about a 10 percentage point difference in credential attainment between those with high food security and those with very low food security. Same thing when we looked at housing. I'm not going to show you the unadjusted means for all these. It's basically the same story. Once you put those background factors in, right, there's still this difference where those who are housing secure are more likely to earn a degree the next year than those who indicated that they had experienced some form of homelessness. Same thing with GPA, right? The students who had high food security had a higher GPA than those who had a very low GPA. Same thing with housing, it's about 5% lower, right? So, what are students doing, right? How are they coping with this? There's some evidence that it's impacting their school performance. A question I often get is, are these students working, right? I can tell you in this sample, about 60% of students are working, and levels of work did not vary across food or housing security levels. So the students with the lowest level of food security were just as likely to work as the ones who had high food security levels. The only difference that we saw was when we compare students who are homeless versus those who had a home. So among students who are homeless, 57% were working, and among those who had a home, it was about 62%. It was about 5 percentage point gap. So it's a statistically significant difference, right? But I do think it's interesting in itself that fully 57% of undergraduates who are homeless are working. And when you look at how many hours they're working, just among those who are working, no differences. Even among the homeless students, they're working about 30 hours per week on average in this sample. So we also asked students, are you getting any public assistance related to food, right? Things like SNAP or WIC, right? Things that help with your food-related social safety net. Here we do see a difference, right? So among those with high food security, about 1 in 5 were drawing on the public safety net to get some kind of a food resource, whereas about 40% of those with very low food security were. So this is, interesting, a couple things to point out. This suggests that at least the social safety net in part is doing its job, that these students are receiving it, but they're telling us, I'm getting enough to eat, right? That's what we want to see. Even you're drawing on the social safety net and you're getting enough to eat. Of those with very low food security, 60% are not drawing on the social safety net for food resources. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. Certainly there's lack of information, right? There's stigma. But one of the reasons why this number is lower than maybe it could be, right, is that there's these really complex eligibility rules for SNAP participation among college students. So again, thinking back, Coco told us about this in her interview, right? She says, food, that's a big issue for me. I was hungry, and you can't get food share, which is Wisconsin's version of SNAP. Since I'm 20, I'm old enough to get it, but while I'm in college, I can't get it. They don't give you a Quest card if you're a full-time student, right? So Coco said, I'm old enough to get it, but I'm a student, so I can't get it. So Coco knew, and what some of our other students know, is that college students have to meet income and asset requirements just like everybody else, right? If you want SNAP benefits, you have to be below a certain income. You can't have a bunch of assets in the bank, right? It's a means-tested program. If you're a college student, you also have to meet an exception. On top of that, there's extra rules for college students who are enrolled at least half-time. So they have to be working 20 hours a week or more consistently. Coco was working, but I think, as our labor market has changed, right, and work has become more precarious for those without a college credential, keeping that consistent 20 hours per week is hard for a lot of our students, right? If business is slow, you get cut, right? Go home early, right? They don't always have that consistent work schedule. You can get an exception if you're caring for a child. Later on in the study, Coco actually became a mom, and after she became a mom, she was eligible to receive food stamps at a later interview. You can get food stamps if you're receiving work study. Now this sounds pretty good at face value. You're like, yeah, receiving work study, that's for low-income students. The problem is our federal work study program is so underfunded that only about 1 in 10 eligible students actually receive work study. So it sounds kind of good in theory, but the LUM numbers are so low that's not really a pathway to an exception for a lot of students who are eligible for work study, but their institutions don't have the funds to give it to them. And then there's a whole host of kind of other assistance programs if you're near some job training programs, or if you're receiving cash welfare, TANF, some other ways that you can get SNAP benefits. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to tell you about Coco. I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say about cocoa, I talk about in this section, is, for food insecurity can manifest in a lot of different ways, right? There's this paradox where some individuals who are food insecure are actually more likely to be obese, right, due to some of the poor nutrition things. For cocoa, it really manifested itself in being underweight. So in one of our later interviews with her, she said, quote, "I'm probably like 92 pounds right now, down from 105, even though she told us that her goal weight was 115. So Coco was visibly food insecure and not getting enough food to eat in our interviews and relationship that we had with her. When it comes to housing, we see lower rates of public assistance use. Among homeless students, right, less than 1 in 5 are getting support. This is really, I think, a reflection of our housing policies nationwide, right? So among those who need housing support across the nation, only about 1 in 4 get support. I think many of you are probably aware public housing has really long lists. If they're open, they're closed for years, right? We don't have enough vouchers to go around. Sometimes in places where we have vouchers, people can't find a private unit to take the voucher, right? So again, we see this all reflected in our college student population as well. So in summary, right, we find that, substantial shares of students are food and housing insecure. Those who are struggling to get enough to eat tend to have lower levels of academic achievement and attainment. They're also more likely to report health problems, right, including mental health problems. There's quite high rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation among students who are food and housing insecure. So let me wrap up before we turn to hear from you and some of your questions and have a discussion. I just want to talk quickly about the need for a multifaceted response. So food insecurity, housing insecurity, this problem of material hardship more broadly, is a difficult, complex, multifaceted problem. Some people call it a wicked problem, right? And I don't think there is a single silver bullet solution, right, that is going to get us out of this. So I spend a lot of time working with colleges to think about how can they intervene immediately in the short term today, right? So many colleges, right, in fact, over 600 colleges across the nation have food pantries on campus and are part of the CUFBA network, the College and University Food Bank Alliance, right? That is one approach to helping students who are hungry today getting enough to eat. Others have taken a spin on that, and rather than opening a food pantry on campus, they've started food scholarship programs, right? So instead of a scholarship of dollars, it's a scholarship of groceries. So I have colleagues in Houston that have collaborated with the local food bank there to hand out groceries to students every other week, and they're studying the impacts of that program right now. Another response is to implement emergency grant aid programs. There is a growing body of evidence that indicates, right, that giving students small grants, one-time grants, often of a few $100s when they're in an emergency situation, can really be the difference between dropping out and staying in school, right? So these are the instances where students have perhaps a car breakdown, a computer stolen, right, a life event happen, and this is to get them through that episode. Of course, implementation matters. Emergency grant programs need to be implemented in a way that is responsive, right, and isn't overly burdensome, right? We can't have a lot of bureaucratic work and vet your application for a week and then send it to financial services and they take a week to cut the check, right? When it's not implemented well, it doesn't have the intended impacts that it has. But when done well, emergency grant aid is one of the solutions that has a really growing body of research behind it. Another approach is to help students with meal or housing vouchers. So I'm working with a college in Boston to study their meal voucher program. So students who are having trouble with food insecurity, their lowest income students, get a voucher, a debit card to use on campus in the college cafeteria. So we think this not only helps them get food to eat, right, but we hope it increases their sense of belonging, right? You're on the college campus, right, with your peers, using a card just like everybody else uses a card. So we're studying that. The next topic is charity assistance. This is really broad. This is just the idea that colleges collaborate and partner with local nonprofits and social service agencies in their community to bring those services onto campus, right? So a lot of colleges that I work with, for example, will have VITA tax. Does anybody know about the VITA tax preparation sites, those free tax preparation sites that are in the communities? Why don't we have one here on our college campus, right? So in particular, students who don't have a tax liability but might be eligible for that EITC, that earned income tax credit, you can make sure that they draw down on that tax credit and get those benefits. And then the last one I'll mention is public benefits, right? So this is where colleges work with students, and sometimes, again, a social service agency is involved to help students who are eligible tap that social safety net, right? Tap the SNAP benefits, tap WIC, tap whatever state, local, federal resources they may be eligible for. In a study that I did a couple years ago in the community college sector, we found that students who were eligible for the social safety net, when they drew down on those benefits, they got an additional about $6,000, right, in supports. That's basically a doubling of the Pell Grant and is real dollars in students' pockets. Of course, many of these things, right, are kind of, some might call it Band-Aids on a bullet wound, or, they're very short term, right? They're not going to prevent students from coming hungry in the future. So we have students today that we need to serve, but I think it's also important to think about prevention efforts, right? Systematic and systemic changes to keep students from going hungry tomorrow, right? So I think we need to have a serious conversation in this country about the price of college, about the wages that we pay people that don't have a college degree in particular, about our affordable housing, as well as our meal programs. I have a policy proposal out, that's asking the question and making the call. We have a pretty robust national school lunch program in our K-12 system. What would it look like to expand that into higher education as well, now that a 13th, 14th, 15th year of education is required for most economically stable living wage type jobs. So I think a combination of immediate interventions as well as some systemic prevention, right, is necessary to help students meet their needs, right? Their educational goals will follow after that. So I'll leave it there, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks. Yes.
I appreciated your talk and enjoyed it quite a bit. I guess I have a question about this last slide on the short-term, or the immediate and the systemic solutions. And I guess what question colleges actually play in this? Because when I think about these first sort of immediate intervention sort of steps, it seems great, but they all cost money, and colleges are caught in the same political economy that's causing some of these problems that students are experiencing in the first place. And if anything, are seeing funds reduced for this type of program, and then are also turning to raise tuition to fund programs like this. So I guess to what extent can that actually lead us to sort of some sort of solution? And I guess for the longer term in the systemic prevention, would you suggest college administrators take more of a leading role on making these types of arguments rather than arguing for allowing to raise tuition caps, for example?
Great questions, right? Tough questions. So the first question is, whose responsibility, right? What responsibility do colleges have? What responsibilities do communities have? What responsibilities do individuals have, right? No easy answers there for sure. I think these are conversations that need to be happening at multiple levels. I think one thing in conversations that I have had with college administrators, right, is this idea of seeing this problem not as an individual problem, right, of a student made a poor choice or a student isn't working hard enough or that, but really this is the result of a system that is failing our students. And in fact, when you see the relationship to academic success and attainment, for many of those college administrators, it becomes an imperative, particularly in the increasing era of accountability, when they're under the microscope for retention rates, for graduation rates, if this is a reason that students are dropping out of college, right, and taking their tuition dollars with them when they drop out as well, there is, I think a business argument that some people are making that this is a short-term investment or a small investment to help students reach their goals, which are, in line with the goals of the university or the college. The longer-term question, right? This is live streamed. I have to be careful who's watching, get myself in trouble, start some debates here. I think I would say, I think it would be beneficial for higher ed writ large, without naming any names, to enter into more proactive conversations about the value of higher education as a public good in our communities. It's something that we used to talk about a lot. We had investment right after World War II and the GI Bill, and that has changed markedly in the 1980s around a discourse of privatization and private goods. So I think, getting ahead of that conversation in a proactive stance rather than a reactive stance would probably be beneficial to the field. Yes?
When you were talking about earlier how sometimes they might think, oh, the student's not doing it because they're just not working hard enough or what. Did you run into that stereotype very often with some of these people, and is that why they might be pushing this under the rug, because they have this idea that it's more or less the student's fault more so than it is a college's fault, because the college has been running, therefore it must be successful and nobody else is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in another study that I didn't talk about today, we actually interviewed about 60 college administrators, so presidents, vice presidents, deans and directors, as well as faculty and staff at those institutions. And we kind of interviewed multiple people at some schools to try and get a sense of how much is this a college culture thing. And then we also interviewed across, I think it was like 7 states as well, to try and get some diversity and variation in our sample that way. And we found basically 3 responses, right, from those administrators, faculty, and staff. So one group we categorize as taking a very systemic perspective on the issue, right? When we talked to these, college leaders, they said, this is an education problem, this is, a problem with society, and, there's poverty in the U.S., and it's, outside, and it's in our doors as well, and we need to meet students where they are. There's this great quote by a dean that says, some people will think homeless students are not college material, they are college material. It's our job to meet students where they are and work with them, right? Great analogies among growing trees and flowers and watering students, and they said, this is a systematic problem, and we need to be part of a systematic solution. A second group said, this is an individual problem, and I think it's bad luck. And because it's bad luck, there's nothing we can do. I'll throw my hands up in the air, right? So they just had, poor chance that, they got a bad landlord and they're out, on the things. So, I'll pray for them or, do what I can, but that's about it. And then this third group said, this is certainly an individual problem, but it's not bad luck, it's bad choices, right? So these students are poor because they have made poor choices in life, and in fact, I don't even call them these students, it's those students, because I don't know that they have a place at my university, right? They're not our students, right? It's those students. And I have to say, one of the most interesting things about that study is that we saw that variation in both sectors. It's not like the 2-year college, presidents talked about this way and the 4-year that way. I mean, it was across sectors and across places. And you see those narratives in society about the deserving poor and the undeserving poor, and some of those things really playing out in these conversations as well. So it's certainly a mix, and we found those 3 responses when we talked to administrators, faculty, and staff.
Did you offer any comebacks to some of these individual problems or thinkers? Did you give them like a snappy remark on that? 'Cause I've got a couple of things I could say.
It's hard. I'll tell you, in one of the interviews, a woman said, I just feel like we're becoming a halfway house, right? The number of students in and out of this place, I don't know what we're going to do, right? And maybe you can talk to some of your colleagues and professors about qualitative research and some of the when you do respond and when you don't, and when you do intervene and don't, and there's different approaches. In this study, it was not an intervention approach. We nodded our heads and said, please tell me more. Yes?
So, what do we know about the experience of students experiencing food insecurity and their higher education experience outside of GPA?
Outside of GPA?
I mean, we're using GPA as to represent success in terms of that. Has there been any study of the phenomenon outside of,
Yeah, out of academics. So
not so much outside of GPAs in general, because I don't know about people in this room, but I find GPAs very skeptical in terms of the representation of success and participation in higher education and learning, for that matter.
Sure.
So what do we know about, if anything,
right.
about
So in my studies, I've used GPA and attainment.
attainment of
Right, credential attainment. So in the data I showed you, it would be any type of credential attainment because it was in the community college sector. So it could be an AA, but it could also be a certificate or a diploma or any type of credential. I've also done similar analyses in the four-year sector where it's more looking at BAs. But I think attainment is the measure that, relating to this gentleman's question, right, really kind of gets notice from a lot of folks. So that's what I would say in the academic sense. I don't know if you have other ideas of what you would like.
I just was wondering, I mean, what you said about attainment, one thing we might assume, I don't know, that attainment helps you increase your economic,
Right.
return, revenue, and that might change your food security, it might.
Right.
But but are they, what are they doing besides that, if anything? Is there, what is the kind of participation they have? Are they part of the campus? Are they,
Right.
because I think those
Yeah.
implications can affect the rest of what we're talking about.
Certainly, yeah. So I've given you a very narrow slice today, right, of outcomes to look at. In a paper that I'm currently working on, I'm looking at mental health, right? And in a study that I'm doing right now, we have measures of social belonging.
Okay.
So that is in the works, but I think, your point is very well taken, that is a narrow snapshot, and there's certainly other things. In interviews with students, some of the campus involvement stuff kind of goes multiple ways.
Okay.
Because for some students, right, a coping strategy is to be on campus. So particularly our students who are homeless. So this is where, engaging your campus partners can tell you a lot, like the security personnel. So a lot of students who are homeless are the first ones to campus in the morning and the last ones there at night. They don't have anywhere else to go, right? So as soon as the library opens, as soon as the rec center opens, they are there, right? This, some of us who have worked in K-12 schools, right, and high poverty schools, we know this phenomena, right? It exists in higher ed as well. So, sometimes the security resource officers know the students who are struggling for sure and can easily, identify them. So they're on campus a lot. Is that the kind of campus involvement, integration, right, that we want to measure? How do we measure that, right? It raises a lot of questions, but thinking about a wider set of relationships and outcomes, I think is your point's well taken and an important part of the conversation.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Broton, hi. My name's Greg. I work in our development office here at the university.
Hi, Greg.
I wanted to ask, in your studies here, have you found 2 or 3 universities that address this problem and take care of it?
Well, there's lots of universities that are addressing the problem. I'm not sure what you mean by take care of it.
Is there any universities that identify this as a major problem and have taken steps to actually solve the problem?
Yes, yeah. So there's a few colleges that come to mind. One of them that I'll tell you about is Amarillo Community College. They have a very charismatic president who's a nationally known leader who has made this a focal point of their institutional strategy. So they've taken a number of steps. For one, they have a new student resource center right when you walk in the door. When you're greeted, it's all glass, and it's a one-stop center for students to get all sorts of different supports. So I think the most promising programs that we see wrap these kind of supports into the fabric, into the culture of what it means to be a student on this campus. So we have a tutoring center. We have a health center. We give free flu shots. We have a disability center, and we can help you sign up for public benefits, right? It's just part of what it means to be a student on this campus. We have lots of support services for students. Why not supports for food and housing and transportation and books and childcare as well, right? One thing that this president has done is write into every individual's job description, no matter what position you have on campus, right? That we're here to serve students holistically, and that includes helping them make sure that their basic needs are met so that they can focus on their schoolwork and on their educational goals.
You said this was Amarillo?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a follow-up question to this. Let's see. In terms of solving the problem, I was wondering whether it would be a good idea to draw the kind of bottom line here. So bottom line of basic needs. So it's kind of numerical measures, but when we talked about, let's say, poverty problems at the urban level or at the international level, we have this poverty line here, or international poverty line, that's a human right issue, or citizens' right to a certain level of living standards. So there are a lot of criticisms of those quantitative
Yes.
and programs take care of the problems. However, that kind of practice gives people a better idea of what needs to be done at the university level. For indeed, this basic need that's kind of student empowerment. This is the students, their basic needs are not met, then that's the university's responsibility, or even professors, community's responsibility to make sure that those needs are met. So that's why I was wondering whether it would be a good idea to sometimes draw some bottom line. So Ohio students, at least you have to meet this kind of housing security or food security.
Yeah, so you're suggesting a different line than using like the USDA food insecurity measure or net price. I'm not sure I fully followed the line. That's your recommendation? Did I understand it?
Numerical measures. So that's
Numerical measure.
Food security. So you have to meet these standards to say you are secure in food terms.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I'm fully following, and I'd be happy to follow up with you after to talk more about it. I guess one thing that I would mention that may or may not be related is that my colleagues at what was formerly the Hope Lab, which will now be the new Hope Center for College Community and Justice at Temple University, launching next week. Every fall, they collaborate with colleges and universities across the nation to help them field surveys, right? Work with their institutional researchers or whoever on their campus is interested in learning more, field surveys to find out what is happening on their college campuses, what is the level of need. That data is usually used at the local campus level to have a conversation, to know, what do things look like here, what are our students' experiences, and then talk about ways to respond and solutions. So there could be some, if you all participate in something like that, there could be an opportunity perhaps to think creatively about what quantitative measures might make the most sense that you're thinking of.
I was just curious, so a lot of this looks at while students are in school and they're facing housing insecurity or food insecurity. Have you looked much at career outcomes and how that interplays with if they're suffering from this, or experiencing this while they're in school, how it affects their career outcomes?
That is a great question. I would love to do that work. Longitudinal work gets more and more difficult and expensive. I don't know if there's any funders in the room looking. I will say that I'm actually seeking funding for a longitudinal study that would follow up on students who were in college 10 years ago. And I actually do have data on those students to find out food and housing insecurity questions on those students who are in college. They started in 2008. And I'm trying to get grant funding to do a follow-up longitudinal study now that they're about age 30. And that would be looking at their financial stability, their career outcomes, their socio-demographic, right? Are they living at home? Are they married? All sorts of things. So if I get funding for that study, I could do that analysis. I hadn't thought of that analysis, but...
Well, there's so much narrative out there about showcasing and demonstrating the value of a degree.
Yeah.
And to help speak to some of these interventions, more immediate interventions, that research can help support that.
Yeah, I would love it. If anybody's doing that work, please let me know. There's a gentleman over here I'll go to.
So since we have a lot of master's and doctoral students in here, I have a more pragmatic question.
Sure.
For you. So how do you recruit folks that might be housing or food insecurity for studies?
Sure. So when we're doing prevalence estimate type studies, it is critical not to say that this is a study of food and housing insecurity, right? Because that's going to skew your sample. It's the same thing. You don't want to be standing outside the food bank saying, will you take my survey? This is a prevalence, right? Because you're going to oversample. So the work that kicked this off and started it was a really broad, really long, really broad survey of students' college experiences. And that's usually how I frame it in some type of way. How is college going for you? And we have a lot of questions on there about all sorts of things. And these questions about food and housing insecurity are one part of it. But we never, if your goal is to find out what is the share of students, you don't want to frame it as, a study of food and housing problems. It's different if you're doing interviews, right? Depending upon what your goals are. If you want to learn about students' experiences with it, then you might want to advertise and say, you might want to advertise at the local food bank or food pantry or this kind of thing. Say, I want to learn more about what life is like for you. I'm not looking to find a representative sample, right? Tell me about your experiences.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry, I know I've got a lot of questions, but we've been talking about a lot of how the higher-ups of college have been helping the situation, like presidents and assistants and secretaries, whatever. But what about the students on campus?
Yes.
Because from personal experience, I know people who are suffering from these problems, they will not go to the higher-ups. They don't want to be frowned upon. They don't want this stereotype on them. They'll go to somebody like their friends who understand. So, I knew some sorority and fraternity houses back in my college who had a couple of rooms that they could share. Are some sororities and fraternities, for example, if they have some open rooms especially for the winter, are they going to give this or somehow help somebody to live in these places? What are the students doing to help other students?
Yeah, that is a great question. I spared you from this really complex model of response that I have that's really overruling, but if I show that super complex one, students are really at the heart and the center of it, right? So I came upon this work and this problem by talking to students, by asking them how is school going, right? And them sharing, actually, some of my biggest challenges are getting enough to eat or whatnot. So students have driven this conversation from the beginning. There are national student organizations that are specifically advocating and working around this issue. So I'm thinking of Holla for Hunger, right, is one group that has chapters across the U.S. They come together, they make bread, and during that time when they're making bread, they have these conversations about social issues and things that are happening, and then they sell the bread, and then they donate the resources to other, groups. Swipe Out Hunger is an organization that has dozens of chapters around the nation that was started by Rachel Sumac and her peers when they were college students in California. They actually, they saw that students had extra meal swipes on their card. And what they did is at the end of the semester, they got a bunch of their friends together and said, swipe as many times as you have swipes left. And they got all these boxes of sandwiches and to-go food and started handing it out. They got in a bunch of trouble. Said, you can't do this. And they actually learned this probably isn't the best way to do it because now we have these tables and this food and it's here and it's hot or whatever. But they've transformed into a nonprofit. This is years ago now. And what they do is they said they work with their chapters, universities across the nation. They help students work with their cafeteria and vending services to come up with a model where students can either donate swipes, or if you don't have swipes, you can donate money. At my college, we were just a dollar system or whatever. When they first started, they were actually giving away a lot of this extra swipes or money to the community. And then they learned, actually, there are peers that I needed. So now most of those programs are donating the swipes or the points or the dollars or whatever it is within their institution, right? So that is entirely a student-led movement that now is a nonprofit organization helping students organize across the nation. There are others. There are lots of students that are doing good work, and I think they'll continue to be the leaders in the movement. I think we're at time, right? All right, so I'm happy to stick around and chat, but thank you.